Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Township of Wainfleet Council meeting of November 24th, 2020 to order. I ask everybody to please stand for our national anthem. Okay, our land acknowledgement statement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Okay, I'll look to councillors to see if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none. We don't have any presentations tonight. We move to the mayor's remarks. Please note that these proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available through the township website and youtube.com. In accordance with the regional bylaw, we ask all those in attendance in the gallery to wear their face covering and maintain appropriate distancing for the duration of the meeting. The sign on the side of the town hall, you may have seen it when you came in, has been restored by our arena staff and was reinstalled this morning. 2020 marks our 170th birthday as Wainfleet was established in 1850, and 50 years since retaining our township status when the region was formed in 1970. So if you didn't see it on the way in, have a look at it on the way out. It's just right over there. The Police Services Board will meet Thursday, December the 10th at 8:30 a.m. at Police Headquarters. Council is holding a special meeting on Tuesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. to discuss a staff report regarding the fire station concept study. And our next regular meeting of council here is scheduled for Tuesday, December the 15th at 7 p.m. And I'll look to any councillors if there's any remarks from any councillors. Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just that there's one NPCA item on the agenda tonight in correspondence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from any of the councillors? Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just if we could have the volume of Councillor Cridland turned up a little bit.
Okay, can we do that? Have Councillor Cridland a little louder.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, adoption of previous council minutes. Are there any comments, corrections for the regular meeting of council minutes held November 3rd, 2020? And I think Councillor McClellan has something there he'd like to speak to. Oh, yeah.
So there was an omission to part of my motion, and it reads, whereas the second wave of COVID-19 infections is well on its way, and staff are needed to ensure protection of our townspeople and staff with all their expertise. That was left out.
Okay, you would like that amended?
So if that can get amended and put in, then we'll find it kind of gives a reason why what my motion did was for.
Okay, thank you. So that amendment is made. I have a mover and a seconder for that, please. That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held November 3rd, 2020 be adopted with that as amended. Councillor McClellan, Councillor Gilmore. Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none. Recorded vote. Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
And that is carried. We have two delegations scheduled to speak this evening, and I invite Pauline Fennick up to the podium, please. Ms. Fennick has submitted a delegation request seeking an amendment to Section 5.4 of the Clean Yards bylaw. And Ms. Fennick, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation. Yes, please. And hit the red button on the mic.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Gibson, and good evening, members of the council. Oh, I better put this lower, I'm not that tall. Okay, and my name's Pauline Fennick, and I'm a resident of Wainfleet, and live at just 31870 Highway 3, just 20 seconds down the road from the township. The reason today, or tonight, I'm coming for you is because of a particular bylaw. And it is a bylaw. It was the Clean Yards bylaw. It's 073-2019. And in this bylaw, it has been changed, and it was changed last November of 2019. And in question, it's also, I'm just wondering why it was changed. But before we get to that, I'm just going to say that all of you have received many of emails, like this has been going since March 23rd, that I actually put in the complaint to the township, but the actual incidents have been going on for about 18 months. And basically what it is it's impacted my husband and I's life living in Wainfleet. Unfortunately, we've been here since 2016, but the last couple of years have really been not very good. And basically, it's because of the particular behavior of neighbors and the terrible noise levels of this bylaw that it's been allowed. The problem is, with this bylaw, it allows inoperative vehicles to be on the property. And the problem with that is that these vehicles that are on the property, they're not just vehicles that people work on as hobby vehicles. They're actually vehicles that are restoration vehicles. Like they come in parts. They have cabs, they have boxes, they have fenders. They are ground-up restoration. We live 20 feet apart in ours. We're not a distance of a house to another house. We're not that at all. We live very close. Our living room is approximately maybe 30 feet away from their driveway where they do all kinds of work. And when I say noise, some people say, oh, it's just working on vehicles. It's not. It's constantly, they will do it from 7 to 11, noises that exceed 30 minutes, constant noise, constantly and past, all the time, during COVID, anytime they want. We've expressed many times that, you know, the noise level is very loud. We let it go for a long, long time until we had to put the complaint because the yard was littered from every type of vehicle and part you can imagine. As a matter of fact, I have so many pictures, and really, I couldn't even bring them. I couldn't bring them because if you were to actually see the place that is so close to your township, it's just not right. It's something you just don't want in your township, because I know with this township, and I've read a lot of bylaws. I've read the bylaws. I know a lot about Wainfleet, even though I've only lived here for 5 years. I know a lot because I've researched it from when I lived in the city and in the other Niagara areas that we've been. It's a great, great place. We wanted to live in here, and this is a retirement place. And to have this bylaw like this and allowing these vehicles make it extremely difficult to live there because it's just extremely noisy. They've still got the items on the property, and they said that they are visually, you can't see them. Well, the reason why we can't see them is because we had to put up a $20,000 fence not to see the mess that was on this property. And that was, of course, concerning, but we loved Wainfleet, so we thought, well, no, we're going to build a fence so we don't have to see it. But the fence is one thing you don't see, but the noise is another thing that you just cannot get away from. So we had to even come to the point of getting the police involved, which I hated to do because I know the police have bigger things to do than coming and saying they had to shut them down. And they did. They shut them down twice, but it doesn't stop them. They do not care. They told me when I moved there that they don't go by bylaws. That was my introduction. So whatever, they're not going to follow the bylaws. The problem with a lot of these things, they may be nice to some people that can work, with vehicles and have them as hobbies. It's great. My husband has tons of vehicles, and he works on them. But the noise levels has to be stopped. You cannot have that happening 20 feet from somebody else's property. So really, in a nutshell, I'm not going to go on too long about it, but I would have some suggestions. And it's not taking them out completely, because it's nice. But in the hamlet, I would say and recommend that it has to be a different distance of about 500 feet to be away from another adjacent property, to be doing this type of I'll say, auto body, salvage company beside me, wrecking yard, whatever it was, but that's exactly what it was. So, so if you're going to have two vehicles, that's fine, but they have to have a 500 feet distance. And that would be one recommendation that I would suggest that could possibly make life a little easier. I also did a little bit of research, and if you look at the mission statement of Wainfleet, which is fantastic. I know a lot about mission statements. I worked in insurance. I know all about it. And they want to grow the town, which is perfect. There's saw developments. Hey, kudos to that. That was great. That's actually going to benefit our property. We're right adjacent, and maybe one day we're able to do 6 or 7 houses on that. But really, to be really honest, you're going to get people coming from the city or anywhere. Are they going to want that bylaw to be adjacent to them, that they hear this going on all the time? And that's what can happen. And I know it can happen because I have, family that come from the city, and they just said, wow, there's no way they can live like this. And I said, well, we love the property. I love being here. I like the property. But it comes to a point that, you can only take so much, and we're at that point. Another thing about it is that, so for our property, I think the real estate value of it now, it just decreases it. Everything decreases. The look of Wainfleet, when you see it so close right in the township, you just don't want that. I think we can do better than that, and I think we should do better than that. So it's nice that people can do it, but if they want to do it, maybe they shouldn't, I hate to say it, but live in the township 20 feet, 30 feet apart from your neighbor. So that's one of the suggestions that I can make is that. The problem too, I find this bylaw, with some neighbors, maybe not all, it edges on to have, unfortunately, illegal vehicles now on the property. And they are illegal. I know it. The police have told us, and they're illegal. Problem is, this bylaw says the owner. Well, they're not the owner that's working on these vehicles. They're the children that work on these vehicles, and the children's friends that come over and works on the vehicles. So that's another issue I have too. Like, it says owner. They're not owners. Why are they working on all these vehicles? Another thing I mentioned before is like it's hard to have the police coming at your property, and I really don't like to do that. And of course, they know it's us doing it, and other people have complained in the town to me and saying, how can you, they're just not going to complain. And
Last minute,
okay.
Pauline, 1
And
minute.
the thing is, if we don't get the complaints going, nothing's going to be done. But so I'm just requesting for us, because I don't want to say any more. Really, we just need this noise down, and we know there is a noise bylaw. We know it, and I know what there's a noise bylaw in the township as well. So I'm just want to know if they can reconsider that suggestion of just that kind of stuff in the hamlet. I would suggest not a go. It has to
Okay.
be, or at least 500 feet.
Thank you very much. If you'll just stay there, there may
Yeah.
be some questions from some of the councillors.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And are there any questions or comments from any of the councillors? Oh, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I have a question for you, but through the mayor to the CAO.
Okay.
What enforcement action has occurred to date that you're aware of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. To the best of my knowledge, the bylaw officer has been in touch with the complainants, has visited the site on several occasions, numerous occasions, and conducted inspections to determine whether or not the storage of vehicles on that property is being done in accordance with the Clean Yards bylaw, and as well as whether the activities occurring on that property are consistent with the bylaws, including, for example, the zoning bylaw, which regulates sort of commercial operations in residential zones. And to the best of my knowledge, the framework that is currently in place in Wainfleet with respect to the use of people's properties, again, for the most part, we are fairly, I call it small government. We're fairly lenient in what people can do on their own property. And the activities, unfortunately, that were observed by the officer are ones that are consistent or in compliance with the bylaws. So we don't have a technical ability to prohibit what is going on there with the way the bylaws are currently drafted.
Okay, thank you. Further, Councillor Gilmore?
So that sort of begs the question, when do we revisit it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's really a sort of discussion or item that council can decide or provide direction on. Staff are prepared to work in whatever direction council is heading. As was noted by the delegation, the bylaw was updated in 2019, and I remember during those meetings there was discussion, and I think the bylaw did go back and forth with a couple of amendments to it to either tighten up some areas or ease restrictions in others. So again, we're at the direction of council on this.
Okay. Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I seem to recall that any vehicle, that if there was more than 2 vehicles on the property, that they had to be registered and currently licensed in this year. Was that not one of them? And I don't know if you're doing restorations. Do you really have proper plates on a car? And
through you, Mr. Mayor, I actually don't have the bylaw in front of me at the moment, but I did review it prior to the meeting. And the way the bylaw is currently structured, it permits 2 inoperative vehicles on the property. And again, if there are 2 inoperative vehicles, that is permitted anywhere in the township, whether you're in the rural country on a 100-acre parcel of land, or whether you're in the urban boundary, the hamlet boundary, I'm sorry, of Wainfleet, of Marshville, and your lot is just over an acre. you're allowed 2 inoperative vehicles on your property.
Councillor McCollum, carry on.
Yes, and this would be to Pauline. So have you called the MOE,
What is the MOE?
the Ministry of Environment?
Yeah.
They deal with noise. I can tell you if your industry, you will spend $1 million stopping one noise complaint. And they stand on your shoulders and jump up and down on you till you do. So I'm thinking that maybe that's the phone call you need to make. Not to say it's not ours. I agree with Councilor Gilmore. We should revisit this sooner than later. But I can tell you from experience, the MOE don't put up with anything.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Councillor Van Vliet,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our
a little louder.
delegate. So is your complaint more about the noise complaint, or?
It's the noise and the appearance of the property, and basically, I'm afraid it's going to start up again. We've had 4 vehicles on the property. The vehicles in question have been confirmed from the police that they are illegal because they've been changing VINs and doing things that are illegal on the property, which is not good. So the property to us, I mean to everybody would feel that way. If you have a really nice property and you spent a lot of money, which we've spent a lot of money in Wainfleet, which is fine, not a problem with it, but to have a wrecking yard salvage company, that's what it looked like. As I said, I couldn't have brought the pictures to you because it was atrocious, like absolutely atrocious. You wouldn't want it beside you. And that's it. And the noise is, well, from one end of my house to another, you hear the noise. I have 9.63 acres, and I go 400 feet on my property to the back, and you heard it. Now, that's how it is, because it was just so loud with the wrenching, and I don't know, this guy was taking every rivet out of these things. It was loud. And it went on for months and months and months. And with COVID coming, and I'm hoping if Premier Ford puts COVID back to us, they will start up again. And it was 7 to 11. They did not care. And I asked them, like I actually went nicely many times, can you please just, or let us know. We have people over, we have barbecues, we have functions outside. They don't care. As I said, it's a problem with a neighbor. Maybe another neighbor would have been fine. We never even thought of it. But the closeness, like we're very close. That's the main thing. But I just can't see why it's in the hamlet, because nobody wants that. Why do you want a whole bunch of, let's say, cars and parts, and they said you can allow them if they're on trailers? Well, sitting there with all cars and parts on trailers, that's what you want to look at? And remember, in Wainfleet, they can park all in their front yard. So they do. They're a family of 11 people. So they park all the cars in the front. They hang car parts from the trees in the front. I had to call for that again. Like it's out of control. The whole thing is out of control. And when the bylaw officer does come and he leaves, they put it all back again. It's all hidden behind the, like let's say there's sheds and that. But I see it because that's my fence, because I own everyone, like I own the whole backs of all the properties. So I can see what they're hiding, what they're doing, whatever they're doing. And then we had to call the bylaw officer back. I mean, that's not what you're supposed to.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Where I'm thinking is this could be somebody's hobby or somebody's way of making money, because my son's a mechanic, so, there could be any day, night or day, something sitting in my vehicle that's getting worked on with an impact gun. So I know how loud it is. But I'm fortunate. I live in the middle of nowhere. I just think it's a little bit of a neighbor thing, more of a civil matter than it is, because we can't really dictate how people run their lives and what their hobby is.
And I've been told, I know,
And
they are.
As far as the parts go
Yeah.
and what's a licensed vehicle and what's not a licensed vehicle, We have no laws for
Yeah,
that.
but and that's the problem. See, the thing is, when you have the bylaw, which is fine that we have the bylaw here, but we can't enforce it. You don't know. They said, well, what they can tell. They assume that if it's on their property, they own it. But they don't know if they own it. They don't know where these vehicles are coming from and what's happening. But I know what a hobby is. I know that, but you're going to be like, do you like that? You have to really think about it. That's because your son's maybe doing it. But the problem is it goes on till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Why are you fixing vehicles at 11 o'clock at night? Even if you don't have money. But then again, like, I know what people are saying, and we've been told this by the bylaw officer, like some people, don't have funds.
Okay, thank
You know?
you. Anything further, Councillor Van Vliet?
No, I'm done, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cridlin, did you have a question?
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to our presenter. Again, really just to thank you for bringing these pieces of information. So for me, it's really great feedback for, yet another new bylaw that we put in about a year ago, which, given COVID has, we haven't really even had this in place almost for a year. So I really appreciate getting the feedback. I really appreciate hearing how it's impacting you. So I want to thank you again for bringing this forward for us to be able to think about it, even if it just comes up for a normal review, in the future. This feedback will certainly help us. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no other questions, I'm wondering if we couldn't have a motion from someone to receive the report and perhaps refer this to staff for another look at it, to assess it and bring it back to council. Councillor Gilmore makes that motion. Seconded by Councillor Van Vliet. Any other discussion on that? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Gilmore, in favor?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Cridlin?
In favor?
Councillor Van Vliet?
In favor.
And Councillor McClellan?
In favor.
Okay, and that is carried. So we'll look forward to that report coming back to us. Thank you very much, Pauline. I know we've had discussions, and we'll have a look at it and see where we land. Thank you very much. Okay, our next delegation is Carol Nagy, Executive Director of Hospice Niagara, and she is now on the screen. Ms. Nagy has submitted a delegation request to discuss community funding grant for expansion of hospice, residential, and community services across the Niagara region. And so the floor is yours, Ms. Nagy.
Thank you, Mayor Gibson. Thank you, council and staff, as well as those people who are in the gallery and online tonight. Am I able to share my screen for my presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just going to check and verify everybody can hear me and that you see the screen.
Yes, it's all good.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not sure if many of council are familiar with the services of Hospice Niagara, but I'll spend a few minutes speaking about that first. So we have a 10-bed residential hospice in St. Catharines, where we have been there for about 13 years now, and we provide services, hospice services that are 24/7 at end of life for the entire region. We also have outreach programs, and those outreach programs include palliative care physicians, nurse practitioners that we work in partnership with, as well as our staff that provide counseling and volunteers and wraparound services so that we can help people stay at home as long as possible when they're diagnosed with a life-limiting illness, but as well to die at home if that's what they wish to do, and they're supported to do that. Now, within the residential hospice in any given year, we serve about 250 to 300 people. But in the community services, we serve close to 3,000 people. We also have bereavement services that run throughout the entire region. And we help people who have lost a loved one or a significant person in their life. And those services run groups primarily, over 250 groups per year. And therefore, anybody age 5 to adult, and you don't have to have had prior services from Hospice Niagara. We also provide education and consultation to long-term care homes and professional palliative care education to many physicians and nurses, PSWs, any kind of practitioner, spiritual advisors through the entire Niagara region. So why I'm here tonight is about 2.5 years ago, we faced the reality that in our 10-bed residence in St. Catharines, we were having to turn away up to 300 to 400 people a year just because we did not have the capacity to serve them in a 10-bed residence. So the board of directors of Hospice Niagara thought that we have to do something drastically different. And we started to look at options to expanding the residences. So we talked to many communities across the region, and of course, we're a not-for-profit organization, and the first hurdle is always finding land. We were able to actually start a redevelopment planning with 2 long-term care homes that we'll be rebuilding in the Niagara region. These are not-for-profit long-term care homes, one run by the region, Gilmore Lodge in Fort Erie, and the second one in Welland with Foyer Richelieu. Both of these organizations donated the land to Hospice Niagara and have been working with us in order to build, they're 230 beds roughly. And when we build alongside them our 10 beds, you can imagine the economy of scale that we would achieve in doing that kind of partnership. We also are looking at how we can save Hospice Niagara in its operational costs from year to year. So things like sharing one generator across the 2 sites. We're looking at the same IT structure serving hospice that it would for these larger long-term care homes. And then how can we share things like kitchen facilities and laundry? So all of that becomes really important to a hospice that's not fully funded. So this project will provide 20 new hospice residence beds in Niagara, but also bring close to 50 or 60 new healthcare jobs, primarily professionals working within end of life. And those professionals will be also working within other settings like in-home care, hospitals, long-term care as well. The capital build will be $14 million investment, and with salaries and then the annual costs, it's bringing about $3.3 million into this region in economic investment. So when we started this plan, we then dug into some of the details of how we could support this and make a case for the province. And what we found out was not promising for Niagara. So we know that we have an aging population, but in fact, we also have an aging population that's living with chronic diseases at a faster rate than any other province or any other part of Ontario, sorry. And it's predicted that this will increase by 72% by 2036. In our hospital system, we have the 4th largest average hallway medicine conditions. And I tell you, this is where people are dying, in the hallways of hospitals or in rooms that are not equipped to provide palliative care. And it's not that our hospital staff aren't caring and trying their best. They absolutely are. Hospitals are just not the place, ideally, for people to die. We also have the 2nd highest hospital costs. In the last study that was done in 1997, and I assure you it hasn't gotten better since then. And our hospital system spent $118 million in acute palliative care in Niagara. We also have some uncertainty around our South hospitals. So for people who live in Wainfleet, it's likely Port Colborne is their hospital that they would go if they're experiencing pain and symptom management at end of life or wanting to access palliative care at end of life. We know Port Colborne Hospital, in my conversations with the president of the hospital, certainly it's up in the air and whether it becomes an urgent care center, and that would mean that these beds would disappear for Wainfleet residents. We also know the same kind of uncertainty exists for the Welland Hospital, and that in the Fort Erie Hospital, where there is a palliative care unit served by Dr. Scheer, who actually provides care to a lot of our Wainfleet residents, those beds will be closing when that hospital moves to Niagara Falls. The last hospital issue was the Hotel du Shaver. It has 5 end-of-life beds, and when they went to renew and ask for increased bed capacity to the province made it very clear that they were not going to allow any new beds, end-of-life beds, at at Hotel du Shaver, and because they are a rehabilitation hospital, and that is going to be what they're going to focus on. They can keep the 5 beds, but by the data provided to us from Hotel du Shaver, that puts this region already 17 beds short by the next 5 years. So we have a real end-of-life crisis right now coming in Niagara. So our solution, again, was to build these 3 palliative care centers of excellence. It really is a triangle, with one in St. Catharines with 10 beds, Welland and Fort Erie, each with 10 beds, so that across our region, it's no more than a 20-minute drive for anybody to access a residential hospice. It will also increase our community programs and our outreach programs by bringing those care providers to work within the hospice environment. So the impact for Wainfleet residents is this kind of care is going to be closer to home. We're going to be able to put it more into people's homes, save healthcare funding, and provide people the kind of care that they deserve and that they want at end of life. Saves our hospitals settings upward of $10 million a year by this investment in palliative and home care. A hospital bed at end of life is approximately $1,100 per day. A hospice bed is $465 a day, where hospice at home is $100 a day. So just looking at these numbers, it makes more sense as a region that we start to invest in these other kinds of services other than hospital care for end of life. Hospice Niagara has phenomenal experience data. We rank, upward of 100% for all of our programs when we're rated by families and by our patients and by our clients. We know that by partnering with long-term care in Welland, that we'll be able to offer our services in French as well. We're also working with the Indigenous Health Network in Fort Erie to make sure that the hospice that's in that community is culturally safe for Indigenous people in our community.
Last 2 minutes, Carol.
I gotcha. So by increasing palliative care throughout the region, Niagara moves towards a truly modern, connected healthcare system that nurtures partnerships between long-term care, community, hospitals, home, and hospice, and ensures that every person receives the high-quality care that they expect and deserve. My ask for Wainfleet tonight, and I know it's difficult, and I know that I live in Wainfleet, I know the situation of our budget, but if we don't invest in this kind of care now, when are we going to do that for the people of Wainfleet? And when these other beds close, we will have no option but to drive to St. Catharines in order to have people from Wainfleet receive hospice care. And for me, that's not good enough. The ministry has approved this plan and has committed to the operational funding once it opens. They are in conversation with us about the $4 million in the policy grant from the province that we're hoping they invest. We certainly want to show an all municipal support in order to leverage that grant. And from Wainfleet, we're asking for a $4.83 commitment based on your 2016 census, which adds up to roughly $32,000 in this year's budget, but distributed over a number of years. So this really becomes a point of a percentage when we look at the increases on the tax bill. And I'm sure that our treasurer can add some insight into that. So that's my ask tonight, that this is passed by the Wainfleet Council in order to provide this care and make sure that it exists, and also that it expands in Wainfleet for everybody. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good presentation. Are there any comments or questions of our delegate? Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to obviously commit any money because it's not budget time, but I just want to say thank you, Carol, for your presentation. And my nephew had to use hospice, and it's not for old people, it's for very young people too. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Cridland? Councillor Cridland?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mayor. Again, extend my thanks for sharing this with Council, Carol, and also with all of Wainfleet. So I'm not familiar with all the benefits of Hospice Niagara, so this was a great update for me, and I'm sure others in the community will benefit. One question would be for any residents, organizations, businesses within Wainfleet. that would like to find out more or consider making a donation in light of what you've presented today and the challenges, who do they get in contact with and how do they do that? And another maybe smaller question, which I'm sure you have at top of mind, is what's the total ask then for who are all the municipalities that you're asking? Because I saw a slide that said 10. And then what's the total ask that you're hoping to get from municipalities, just from the municipality point of your campaign? So thank you.
Thank you very much. So people can get a hold of us through our website, hospiceniagara.ca. We're listed there for sure. And then all the numbers and all the program information is on that website as well. And thank you for your question about the total ask. We're hoping that we can have a $1.5 million ask when we add all the municipalities together. Right now, most municipalities are referring this matter by motion over to the budget committees. Normally it's going through with all support. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to reach that amount from our municipal partners. And I just want to add as well that Hospice of Niagara has not asked any municipality for money up until this date. And so, investing in this kind of capital expansion is a one-time offer. We understand that. And we understand that our continued success depends on our very hardworking fundraising department, and that will continue to support the operations.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Cridland? Okay. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Carol, for the presentation. I'm just wondering, have you approached the region yet, and what was their response?
Thank you, Councillor Gilmore. Through you, Mayor. Yes, we have approached the region as well. We've made a presentation to the budget committee of the region, and it's much the same framework that most hospital builds have done that. St. Catharines, for example, has approached both the municipalities as well as the region for a capital ask, as will the hospital in Niagara Falls. So we presented to the budget committee. We are continuing to meet with the staff because this is a joint project. So again, received full motion for this to be forwarded for consideration to the region's budget.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Gilmore?
Just one other question, Carol, and this is just boilerplate. I assume that you're a registered charity, is that right?
That is correct.
And only for my personal interest in charities, do you know what your administrative load is comparative to your revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go on to Revenue Canada, you'll see that the percentage in our fundraising, which is really basically our administrative, and I'll break it down easy for everybody, is 5 cents on the dollar.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. We pride ourselves on that number.
That's a very low number.
Mm-hmm.
Any other?
I was just going to add, sorry, Mayor Gibson, that our priority is on service, and even in this expansion, we are not expanding, leaps and bounds administratively. This is about expanding services to people and keeping, again, our administrative costs very, very contained, so that we can continue to operate. And we also have over 200 volunteers that provide us support in our organization. So by opening up these 2 new centers, we'll grow that by at least 600 more volunteers.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McClellan? Mike?
I have one question that doesn't seem to make sense to me. If Hospice Niagara is that much cheaper per day per bed than the hospitals, why aren't the hospitals giving you the money to pay for this? They'd save money.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And in fact, I was just doing a presentation to the province yesterday about changing the funding model and how do we make this more equitable across healthcare and focus on the areas that we need to. Now, it's always not dollar for dollar that you can take away hospital beds. It's a lot more complex than that. But the hospital is a partner in this build, and we are looking through the Ontario Health Team, which the hospital and Hospice Niagara are active members, on how we might be able to look at some cost-sharing agreements in the future in order to make sure that those community palliative care programs continue to operate and probably expand.
Thank you.
Okay, so anybody like to come up with a motion on this presentation this evening? I'm going to guess we probably would do like many of the other municipalities are doing and then refer to our budget sessions, which would make sense to me. Any other thoughts or ideas? Mr. CAO? Oh, Councillor McClellan?
Yes, this would be to Carol again. You had mentioned that this $32,000 would be over a number of years. Is there 4 years, 5 years? What are your thoughts on that? How many years is, like, so you'd want to portion every year for X number of years. Is there any idea, you know, is that over a 3-year period or a 5-year period, or?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that question through you, Mayor. Yes, so, you know, the first opening we're projecting would be 2023 to 24, but certainly that could be paid over a 5-year period. I don't think outside of 5 years is what you want to commit a council to. But I know that smaller communities are going to have a little bit more difficulty. So over 5 years, if that becomes more realistic for your budgets, that would be fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Will?
Mr. Mayor, through you to council. And again, there is a motion that I heard is being proposed to move that towards budget deliberations. But to the delegation, I'd also recommend that they fill out a grant application form, which is a sort of normal process that we have for nonprofits in Wainfleet to try to access municipal funds. So again, there will be a motion coming forward, but just to supplement that, the delegation may want to make that kind of grant application as well.
Okay, thank you. Carol, you were going to ask?
Yeah, that's fine. We can certainly fill out that paperwork. Most municipalities are accepting the letter that we forwarded to the mayor and the motions, but I certainly will fill that out if that's required in Wainfleet. Okay,
thank you. Okay, so can we have a motion, number one, to receive this presentation, and Councillor Van Vliet?
Yeah, I make the motion that we receive it and refer it to the budget.
Okay, thank you. Seconder on that, Councillor Gilmore. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Gilmore?
In favor?
Councillor Cridland?
In favor?
Councillor Van Vliet?
In favor.
And Councillor McClellan?
In favor.
And that is carried. Thank you very much, Carol. Good presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll move into the admin staff reports. And we're going to look first at ASR 38-2020, interim 2021 tax levy bylaw, and we'll look to our treasurer to give us a presentation on that, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. ASR 38 is a report prepared in accordance with the Municipal Act, which gives authority to the treasurer to issue an interim tax bill, which is equal to 50% of the previous year's taxes. So the due dates have been set for February 26th and April 30th, which is the last business day of those months, which is consistent to previous year's billings.
Okay, thank you. Put it on the floor first. The ASR 38-2020 regarding an interim 2021 tax levy bylaw be received. That the interim tax levy installment due dates be set as February 26, 2021 and April 30th, 2021. And that the attached bylaw being a bylaw to provide for interim tax levies for 2021 in the Township of Wainfleet be read and passed. Have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Gilmore and Councillor McClellan. And discussion, please. Okay, seeing none. Councillor McClellan. Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
And Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
And that is carried. Thank you. And we'll also do ASR 39-2020 regarding the 2021 borrowing for current expenditures. And we look to our treasurer, Ms. Louie, to also speak to that one.
Thank you. Through the mayor to all of council. So this is another routine staff report. The Municipal Act does authorize the treasurer to borrow monies to meet current expenditures from time to time as necessary if a borrowing bylaw is in place.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is that ASR 39-2020 regarding 2021 borrowing for current expenditures be received, and that the attached bylaw, being a bylaw to authorize borrowing from time to time to allow the Township of Wainfleet to meet current expenditures during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2021, be read and passed. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Van Vliet. And any discussion? Okay, I lost, oh, there's Councillor Quidland. I'm sorry, I lost you for a second there. Donna, did you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Oh.
No question? Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Quidland, in favor or opposed?
In favor.
Councillor Gilmore?
Favor.
Councillor Van Vliet?
In favor.
Councillor McClellan?
In favor.
And that is carried. Thank you. And we'll look at ASR 40-2020, progress on 2018-2022 multi-year accessibility plan. And we'll look to our CAO, Mr. Colossa, to speak to that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As Council approaches the midpoint of its term, the purpose of this report is to provide you with a quick update on the process and progress of the township in adhering to its multi-year accessibility plan that was developed a number of years ago. In 2005, the province of Ontario passed the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Everyone is familiar with the sort of physical or hard sort of requirements associated with improving accessibility, and our director or our operations manager brought a report just recently to council identifying an assessment that was done of all the municipal buildings and the various sort of accessibility improvements physically that could be made to make the township more accessible to the public. But the AODA goes beyond just simple physical improvements or changes to accommodate people. It also deals with various regulations and requirements associated with things such as employment of both persons with and without disabilities, hiring policies, accommodation policies, service delivery policies, purchasing policies, training for staff and people who interact with the public, and so on. The purpose of the report before you today is to highlight the sort of elements of the township's multi-year accessibility plan and the status that we are sort of achieving as we progress through those years. Overall, I'd suggest we're doing a good job for a municipality of our size. Again, as noted, the operations manager did sort of highlight some of the physical requirements that were identified in the past, and this report sort of highlights the sort of ongoing effort to address the non-physical sorts of requirements that we need to adhere to. Excuse me. And just finally, in closing, earlier this month, we actually received I'll call it an audit request from the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. And we submitted all of our documentation to them last week, and we're just awaiting the results of that sort of audit. So that's the sort of summary of the report and the plan, and I'm prepared to try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so we put a motion on the floor, the admin staff report, ASR 40-2020, regarding progress on the Township of Wainfleet's 2018-2022 multi-year accessibility plan be received and adopted. A mover and a seconder on that, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Gilmore have moved it. And discussion. Okay, seeing none, I record a vote on that. Councillor Gilmore to receive.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
And Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
And that is carried. Move on to ASR 41-2020 COVID-19 impact report, and we'll look to our CAO again to give us an overview of that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think this is report either 9 or 10 on our COVID updates. We've been doing one at each council meeting since the start of the COVID pandemic in Ontario and in Niagara Region. I suppose the most critical elements to sort of highlight in the report this month, one is that Niagara Region has currently moved into the restrict or orange phase as of today's date. A lot of our neighbors are moving to the red phase, especially the larger municipalities, larger regions. And of course, Toronto and Peel have moved to the gray or the lockdown phase. So knock on wood, we're still in a good place, but that means that we cannot let our guard down at this time. As a result of the move to the orange phase for Niagara Region, I just wanted to highlight that we've had to do some minor amendments or modifications to our arena and facilities operations to accommodate the more restrictive guidelines that the province has released in orange. They are fairly minor, particularly dealing with the number of people and especially spectators in the arena, for example, during the operation of that facility. Moving forward, Town Hall. Again, at last meeting, I reported on a small outbreak of COVID that we had in the building. That has since cleared up, and I am happy to report that everyone is in good health and has returned to full unrestricted duties at the township. The public library is progressing as well as part of our as a part of their response to our outbreak on this side of the street. The library did restrict some of their services, but I'm pleased to announce that effective this past Monday, they are cycling back up into full sort of pre-outbreak services, which includes appointments to come in and browse, appointments to use computers, faxing and photocopying and so forth. They are still currently including curbside pickup and drop-off for those that wish to go that route. I'm happy to announce that the Wainfleet Farmers Market, the Christmas market, has been in operation now and has been doing very, very well. I know we had a major storm run through the one event, but we still did have a good number of turnout, and everyone is very pleased with that. Remembrance Day was conducted without any real issue. We thank everyone for sort of adhering to our COVID guidelines. We did have a small technical glitch that prevented us from live streaming the event, but it was posted immediately to the web thereafter. So we thank everyone for their participation there. Safe Restart funding. This is the grant application process that we discussed at the last council meeting, where in the first phase of the program, the township was awarded $195,100, and we were seeking the potential of and the support of council in proceeding on and applying for the second phase of the program. Unfortunately, I'm sad to report that after all the sort of number crunching and all the juggling that happened to try and sort of fit our financial records with what the province was requesting, that we simply did not qualify. We have not expended in excess of the $195,100 that we have already received. So unfortunately, the grant did not proceed. I know the treasurer is on the line, is able to speak to that additionally if required, but if not, that's sort of where we ended up. That said, there has been an announcement from the government, both federal and provincial, that the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program COVID Resilience Stream has now been released, and we have received specific notification, and it's attached to this report, advising that we are eligible to make application for a single project in the sum of $100,000. At this time, staff are reviewing the policy or program guidelines. There's actually a session that's being held within the next week or so with the province to sort of review those guidelines and the process for making application. And at this time, staff will be trying to identify a project that meets the guidelines that we can make application for to receive that $100,000 and move forward. And that summarizes the report. If anyone has any questions, I will try to answer. Or as I said, the treasurer's online as well if there's any specific financials required.
Okay, thank you. So we'll put a motion, admin staff report 41-2020 respecting COVID-19 impact report be received as information. I have a mover and a seconder on that, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Van Vliet, and discussion. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, one of these bridge repairs that we have to do, do they fall under the guidelines? From what I read.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the program, and I'm just flipping to that page because the program guidelines are quite specific about restoration and repair of municipal infrastructure. So the retrofits, repairs, and upgrades are to be targeted at buildings, health infrastructure, and educational infrastructure. COVID response infrastructure, dealing with physical distancing, active transportation infrastructure, dealing with parks, trails, footbridges, bike lanes, and multi-use paths, and disaster mitigation and adaptation. So typical linear infrastructure type stuff for roads does not appear like it will qualify for the grant program.
Okay. I thought I saw a piece on the bottom of that included that then.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and again, I'd refer you to page 110 of 176 of the agenda package, which really does show the sort of focused projects that are eligible.
Okay, anything further, Councillor McClellan?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to the CAO. Again, more good news on, trying to keep us moving forward with this COVID pandemic. So thank you for that big report again. In terms of the $100,000, so two things. Last time you did need something from council based on the requirements of what we were hoping to get and weren't able to get. Is there anything you need from council or that we can anticipate in this meeting? Because I noticed the deadlines are extremely tight once again. So obviously lots more pressure on our Treasury Department. And then also, are we again more certain maybe with this particular package, based again, I realize on what you have now, that we will have something to submit to, benefit from this particular program? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will definitely be making application to access the $100,000 that has already been allocated to us under this program. The trick will be identifying a project that meets all the criteria established by the province and that can be completed in the timeframes specified by the province, which for the purposes of this discussion is prior to the end of next year. So as I said, staff are currently working on identifying projects that would work best and that would fit most appropriately into the categories that the province is establishing. And we'll have more information once we've attended those training sessions over the coming week or two.
Okay, Councillor Cridland, follow up?
Well, just so then there's nothing else that you need from us, like the resolution previously, then is what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more, Donna? Councillor Cridland, anything further? Okay, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the CAO. It seems to me like Category 4, you could use that money up 4 times over without very much work based on last year and what recently occurred last week. So just my advice is just stick to that category and work on that. That's a slam dunk climate change stuff, and like even just retaining walls and shoreline protection on property that we own, you could use that up. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councillor. Staff will certainly, that's one of the projects we have on our list as well.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, we look for a recorded vote in favor of the motion or opposed. Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
And Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to our drainage staff report. DSR 008-2020, consideration of Bridgewater Drain Engineers report. Okay, so I understand that we have some members of the public who wish to address council regarding this engineer's report. So I'll now pass it over to our drainage superintendent, Mark Jemison, an engineer, to speak to the project before we take comments from the public. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. So this staff report is recommending provisionally adopting the bylaw for the Bridgewater Drain Report and moving forward to the Court of Revision process as well. So this meeting is providing property owners with the opportunity to ask questions to the engineer and express any concerns about the report. So to get here, council appointed the engineer in May of 2019. We had an on-site meeting where all of the property owners in the watershed were invited, and that happened in July of 2019. Following that, there were several meetings with regulatory agencies, different landowners, an exchange of what would the drain needed to look like, and then there was a preliminary design presented in February 2020. Notice was mailed to all the impacted landowners at that time, and following that meeting, there were some changes made as well. So the report was filed just before the COVID emergency situation kind of kicked off, so that kind of put a delay as to where we are now. So I'd like to hand it off to Brandon Widner, the engineer who has worked on this report thus far.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Widner. I'm from Spreed Associates in London. Mark has went through some of the parts of the report already, like how we were appointed. And, you know, he did have the dates dead on when the meetings were. I can give you a brief history of the Bridgewater drain. I believe this was one of the last drains Wainfleet has seen submitted. It was submitted most recently in 2015 by John R. Spreet, who I did most of my training under. And I was actually involved with that report at that time. That's the downstream portion that we see, which at the time went through Mr. Welland Ryder's property and started at the Welland River. There's another piece of history on this project. The original Bridgewater drain, which is the upstream part, which is from Far Road upstream, that would be lot 22 to lot 27, was originally a report by C.J. Clark, and that's from 1961. So that is what Mark has currently to do maintenance on as it sits today before this report. There was a portion of water course between the two drains. So there's the Bridgewater outlet drain, which is just downstream of the residential properties on Regional Road 24. And then there is the original Bridgewater drain upstream of Far Road. So there is a gap in the middle. It's about 1,200 meters. That is the main reason this report got initiated. So in 1982, there was some talk of the watercourse in that area by Brian Weeb. There was a letter report submitted to council, but it did not pass. So it didn't incorporate that portion of the drain. In 2015, John Spreet at the time, brought this up with the municipality because I believe the municipality may have did some maintenance work on that portion, but there's no bylaw status. So at the time he wanted to include that, but there was no request from the municipality nor any landowner to proceed with that. So when the report was submitted, it was the Bridgewater outlet drain and it only included the downstream parts. So Mark, later on in 2019, I believe you have a drainage advisory committee. I believe there was a maintenance request to do work on the Bridgewater drain. This is when Mark, I believe, dug the history up and realized that there's no point of doing maintenance because there's a gap in this drain which he can't work on, which led to this. So as Mark mentioned, we were appointed in May of 2019. We had a meeting shortly after that in July. I believe that was at the community center. We went through with the owners of what we were looking at doing, and if they had any requests or improvements they required at that time. So there was a couple of requests submitted. And we have also met with owners individually, after that. I know there's been a request from, I believe, Keith Wheelink at the top end. He's a dairy farmer. He has requested to abandon a portion of the drain. That's included in this report. There was a couple of requests for culvert crossings. This report does include a fair amount of new culverts being installed. So all that is incorporated, and it does include connecting this drain downstream to the Bridgewater drain. So now it will be from top to bottom municipal status, and Mark has the opportunity to maintain that. This project is also reviewed with the Department of Fisheries. We received that approval in January. After January, we had the preliminary meeting with all the owners, and they were given a chance to see essentially the numbers in this report and provide any input at that time. So that's when we show all the owners the costs and any proposals we're doing. I'm not going to say that meeting was very well attended, but there was some of the owners there, and we tried to touch base. I know Mark spends a lot of time in reaching out to the main owners on the project and meeting them, and I believe I met 2 or 3 owners personally down in this area after that point. This report was submitted in March, about when everything fell apart. So it's been sitting since then. The total cost of the project is estimated at $250,000. Now that includes allowances, administration, and all the construction costs, including the construction costs which are essentially picked up by the township, which are new culvert crossings at Far Road, Esley Road, and Traver Road. There's also a culvert cleanout being conducted on Regional Road 24. That's to clean through the existing box culvert. Wainfleet is somewhat unique in my experience of working with them, and sometimes they conduct the work themselves. So for instance, if the township were to elect to do some of the work themselves, like the road crossings, we could then reduce the amount assessed to them by $67,000. And that is shown on page 7. I can quickly go through with the construction, but essentially it's a open ditch clean out with some reconstruction. Most of the reconstruction is from the Bridgewater outlet drain up to Far Road. The rest of the drain has had maintenance in the past, and it is essentially a new clean out with new grades, new culverts being installed, and a small abandonment at the top end. That being said, the breakdown in the report, you can see the allowances are broken down on page 9. That's allowances for right-of-way and damages to lands. There's a cost estimate prepared which identifies all the costs of the project. On page 10 and 11, you then have an assessment for construction on page 12, which shows where the costs are associated. Now the costs of this report are divided between benefit and outlet, and there's some special assessments. So benefit is driven by the length of drain on their property, and outlet is driven by the amount they contribute by land area. Special assessments are shown. There's 4 of them. 3 of them are the Township of Wainfleet. There's also a Schedule D assessment for maintenance. So after this is constructed, years down the road when Mark goes to do maintenance again, he can use these maintenance costs or percentages to bill out future maintenance going forward. Currently, the report Mark has is from 1961, and looking at it, there's been many severances, land use changes at that time, so this updates that. That being said, we did not change the schedule for the Bridgewater outlet drain. That drain was done in 2015, and that maintenance schedule, it has its own. For the other people involved, like the owners, there was, in my report, it's attached to the back, it's a schedule of net assessment. The province currently will still grant agricultural properties 1/3 of their assessment. So essentially, that schedule and net assessment summarize the costs for the owners so they can see what their out-of-pocket expense will be. And that's if a grant is available at that time. That is not a guarantee, but in my experience, has always been there. And that kind of summarizes for the owners. There's some owners that do not receive grant because it's based on farm tax status. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Okay, we also have people in the gallery, I understand, and we also have some people online perhaps. So if anybody has any questions right now of our engineer, would you like to do that first? Okay, not seeing any questions. Okay, so I'll now call upon those members of the public who are present in person and wish to speak this evening. Please come forward. You need to state your name, spell your surname, and for the record, and provide your address prior to the presentation. We'll try to keep the presentations to 6-7 minutes each, and I'll give you about a 1-minute warning when we get to that point, so we're not too long getting this done. So who would like to come forward first? Come ahead, sir. And your name? And your address, John? Okay, thank you. Is it not on? Yeah.
72049, Regional Road 27.
Thank you very much, John.
My first complaint is the fact that you went through this just a few years ago, and it was brought to my attention that the township had never been given authorization to go down across my property with the drain, and I know that I have never given authorization to go down through there. They went through and cleaned it out just a few years ago, replaced the culvert, and now they're saying that they're going to replace the culvert again. In my opinion, that's the height of stupidity, because the culvert is not that old. There's one going across just in front of my property across Regional Road 27, which is going right into the Welland River there. And it's been there an awful lot longer than the one back in my property, and now they're saying they want to replace that one again. Well, that's just a total waste of money. There's no thought put into it whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Anything else there, John? Well, maybe the engineer could speak to that issue about the culvert. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, regarding that culvert. In Mr. Downey's property, there is a culvert there. From my understanding, it was installed, I don't know when, there is no record of it. So in Mr. Downey's property, one thing we need to recognize is that's not currently municipal drain. That is a water course. Before Mark, there was maintenance done there, but there was no authority to do it. And I believe that's maybe how that culvert got installed. I am unaware. Mark could look in the records of that. The problem with the culvert is it needs to go down approximately 18 inches, or almost, approximately 18 inches, about 50 centimeters. In doing that, the culvert there is too narrow for safe transport across it. So that's why we're proposing a new culvert. You know, it's pretty straightforward. The culvert is too high. The reason it's too high is because the ditch downstream was never dug properly. So it needs to be lowered. So essentially it needs to be replaced and lengthened. And that's why a new culvert is proposed. I can't speak to what the township's done in the past in that section of drain. I can tell you that, yes, it was dug. When we surveyed it in 2015, it was recently dug, and it did not drain. And it was dug almost to Highway 24. the drainage superintendent at the time is no longer here. So I can't speak to why he did that. I think he was trying to alleviate problems upstream, and they basically pushed them further downstream. But Mr. Downey's culvert is too high to drain the upstream lands to give them adequate depth. That's why it's being lowered and replaced.
Okay, thank you. Is it being replaced with a bigger culvert, or is that culvert still usable, or?
I believe it's slightly larger and much longer.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't
Downey,
take,
you have some more comments?
Yeah, if it was not ever put in properly, then put the bill through to the construction company that put it in, because it should have been done to the engineer's specifications at the time, and obviously now they're saying it's way too high, so it is not my responsibility to pay for the screw up that they did in the first place. And as far as the width of the culvert, it doesn't take a 4-lane highway just to go from one field to the second. Besides, it isn't even me that is farming the land. I just give it to another farmer to keep the weeds down. And he has never had any problem whatsoever with the traveling back and forth across the culvert that's there. And as far as the depth of the Grand Canyon going down across my property, it's ridiculous. Seeing as I'm at the bottom end of it, just a few hundred feet from Region Road 24, there's no reason for it being 4 foot deep and 8 foot wide. Like, that's just, in my opinion, it's very poor engineering to figure that they need anything of that magnitude going down across there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Downey from council? Yeah. Are there, and just to Mr. Downey's final comments there, is there anything else that the engineer would like to speak to there?
So when you look at Mr. Downey's property, I don't know if the staff can bring up page 2 of our plans, which is the profile. Maybe that would help council see what we're dealing with. So this is the profile of the drain. Mr. Downey's property is approximately, we're looking at station 1700. It's the first laneway to be replaced. In his property, we're looking at excavating approximately 2 feet of material. That will make a ditch that's approximately 4 feet deep, 1.2 meters. And we're trying to contain a 2-year storm event, and in order to contain that, we need some depth and some capacity. That also gives Mr. Downey an outlet to tile his lands in the future. Currently, they might not be tiled, but in the future, they may be. So there is some properties on this drain which we're looking for a subsurface outlet. And in order to get that outlet, the depth has to go lower. So you'll see further up in the drain, there is a Mr. Hessel's, there's a Beamer, there's a Pudliak. Some of those owners have began to tile their lands. That entails they need more depth. To get more depth, we have to lower the whole drain. In Mr. Downey's property, the drain is quite shallow. 2 feet is very shallow for a municipal drain of this magnitude. This drain drains 290 hectares. So that's why there's being improvements there. As you can see on the profile, it looks like most of the drain was dug through Mr. Downey's at one time to alleviate some of the water, but then as you get towards Regional 24, there was a spot that wasn't dug. with regards to his culvert being put to the wrong specifications in the past, there is no current engineer report for the portion of ditch on his property. So if it was installed privately, and it's essentially an obstruction to the upstream drainage.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I know that it was not installed privately. I did not put it there. I was quite happy with the culvert that was in there at the time, and they come along and replaced it anyways without my permission. And I just think it's a complete fault on the engineer's part, because being at the basically the very end, within a couple hundred feet of the Region Road 24 where it ends up, there's no excuse for it being, like I said, probably 8 to 10 foot wide, and the engineer is saying it's 2 foot deep. Well, I don't know where he got his ruler from, but it's a lot more than 2 feet. And it's nothing but a pain for me, because the gentleman that is working the land, he can't even work it right up to the edge of the drain, or the canyon, whatever you want to call it. And it's just the height of stupidity wanting to go in and do anything more on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. I think Councillor McClellan has a question first, please.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the engineer. So, from what I'm hearing, this gentleman's worried that he's paying for all the work that's being done on his property. My understanding of this is that gets proportioned out to everybody that benefits from it. So some of the work that's being done is being paid for by the people upstream. Is that not correct?
That's 100% correct. So yes, Mr. Downey is getting a new culvert, and there's a cost in the report for that, and it's identified in the cost estimate. And then you can look at Mr. Downey's assessment, and it won't be as much as the work in his property. So the further you are up in the drain, the more work you pay for. So if you look at Mr. Downey's property, he's at station 1700. This drain is approximately 4,100 meters long. That included the Bridgewater outlet drain. But he only pays for the work downstream of him. He doesn't pay for the work upstream of him, because it's essentially, as John Spreet would say, it's a toll road. You only pay for the portion you use. Yes, the costs are being picked up by the upstream watershed acres. I can't comment to how the culvert was put in the past. I don't know if Mark can even comment on that. But I don't know what else I can add. It's currently in construction to the upstream drainage. It needs to be lowered.
Okay, carry on, Councillor McClellan.
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, so in my line of work, nobody goes to a 2-year storm or event. They go a 25-year or 100-year storm. So the depth of this ditch and the width of this ditch is significantly smaller and narrower than it would be if you were going to a 25-year event or a 100-year event. Is that not correct?
Yeah, it's 100% correct. So you'll see some of that we have designed the road culverts, so Far Road, Esley Road, and Travel Road, they're designed to a higher standard. So they're designed to a 10-year event, and that's why they're somewhat larger. A 2-year event is, it's a pretty standard storm. But the main reason we need depth is to drain the upstream lands for subsurface drainage, which is farm tiling. And that's why we need the depth. And as you see, as you go further up the drain is much deeper. Actually, it's the shallowest through Mr. Downey and Mr. Visser's property. The rest of the drain is in excess of 5 to 6 feet.
Okay, thank you. So with that draining that many hectares, 290, I think you said, and with Mr. Downey's property being at the bottom end of it, What is the result if it wasn't changed to a deeper and a bigger ditch there, and you did have the big storm come? What would happen?
Mr. Downey isn't at the end of the drain. So he's almost in the middle of the drain. So, you know, there is culverts downstream, and the ditch is shallower downstream. So as, I'm not going to say I remember any of your faces in 2015, but in Mr. Wellenrider's property, the ditch is much shallower. So if you remember our report in 2015, there was a lot of erosion work completed. We did deepen the ditch some, but essentially it flooded out on his lands constantly to the point where he could no longer farm them. So we spent, I believe, considerable money protecting the bends, deepening the ditch from erosion, and trying to contain the channel so it didn't flood his agricultural property. When you go too shallow, then it will spill over the banks and flood into the field. This is an agricultural drain. He's mentioning larger design storms. This is an agricultural drain. It's a very minimalized design. It's to convey the water to a proper outlet and give the upstream lands a proper outlet so they can eventually subsurface drain them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Downey, unless you had final comment.
Well, this gentleman is saying that the drain is a much shallower at the upper end. Then why are they making it when I'm, like I said, I'm just one field away from Regional Road 24. Why are they making such a canyon down across my property and wanting to put 4-lane highway culverts in, and like, what are they thinking? Or why aren't they?
Yeah, I think he said it was the ditches were much deeper and bigger at the top end. Is that correct, Mr. Engineer?
Yeah, it's deeper at the top. With respect to the length of the culvert, we are looking at a 20-foot top width. So that's our kind of industry standard. That gives us approximately 6 meters. We have many owners request larger ones. On this project, that was not the case, but many projects we do, for instance, in Chatham-Kent, I'm going to say most culverts have a 30-foot top. So we're talking about a 12-meter culvert being installed, which is smaller than the road culvert. The road culverts were 16 meters, an extra 4 meters longer. It allows for a 20-foot top, which is slightly larger than the average piece of equipment.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more question.
Okay.
This is crossing how many roadways between where the drain starts and 24?
I don't know, we'd have to look to the engineer or Mark, do you know?
I believe the question is, it's crossing River Road, which is another regional road, and that's down at Mr. Wellenrider's. And that report is from 2015. Upstream of Mr. Downey's property, there is 3 road crossings being replaced. They are all CSPs. You know, they're not brand new. They all show signs of deterioration, and now is the time to restore them, put them at the proper depth, lengthen them where required, and then Mark has a new updated report, which, you know, hopefully we don't have to redo again. These culverts should last, you know, 50 to 70 years. There's no reason why they shouldn't. They're aluminized culverts. They're not regular galvanized CSPs like we put in the 70s and 80s. They're aluminized, they last much longer, and they're much thicker than what we installed in the 70s.
Okay, thank you. And that is one thing that is extremely important here in Wainfleet is our drainage, because we are such flat, low land. It's always really important to do our municipal drains to a standard that will last lots of years into the future. So, anything further, Mr. Downey?
Just 2 more things. Like if the ditching along the roads went out to the Regional Road 27, like they should, then there shouldn't be that much need for an expensive drain like they want and what they want to make even larger. Like it should drain out alongside the road, out to the Welland River, like a normal municipality would have it done. And it just isn't any thinking taking place as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present? Okay, come up, please. And just please, oh yeah, we got to sanitize there first. And please state your name and your address. You can take your, makes it better for speaking.
Okay. Hi, it's Mary Ann Visser, and I'm here with my husband, Ken. We are at 62070 Region Road 24. So we are the property that's just between their property and Region Road 24. So just a little bit of the history, and it's kind of what Mr. Downey was saying. Years, I don't know what I'm doing. Years ago, the
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so years ago, when the ditch was, I don't even want to call it a ditch at this point. Somebody came on our property with no permission. All of a sudden, there was a backhoe digging a ditch. On our property, from Far Road to Region Road 24, it is not a ditch. It is a natural waterway. It's in the report that we'd received. It shouldn't have been dug. It's natural. We keep our property natural. We don't farm our property. We are at the bottom end. So when that backhoe came, we were not informed it was coming. They said, oh yeah, they would have informed you, but we were never informed. So that was the first we'd heard of that there was that it was considered, somebody considered it a municipal ditch, but it was not. It's a natural waterway. So when they dug it partway and to the regional road allowance, and they truncated it there, and then it stopped. So all the water from all the farmland and up the Bridgewater all came to our property and then spread out onto our property. We were told by the ministry that part of our property is now unusable because it's wetlands. It's partially because the water from the other properties are coming and stopping on ours. We were told that the region should come in and clean that drainage, and this was before the 2015, that they should come in and clean out the culvert and dig the rest of that, but that was never ever done. So our property was basically damaged and nothing was ever done. April Jeffs, when she was the mayor, came out and actually looked at it. We met with someone, I'm not even sure who, but to look at it. And they said, well, we'll watch it and see if it causes flooding on the road. If it causes flooding on the road, then the region would have to come in and fix it. But it never got to that depth because it spread out across our property. So now when you're coming in and you're saying, okay, now we got to fix it and you have to pay for it, when we never had a problem before that. So I'm not sure why it falls on us. And then now we're to give you permission to now have access to our property and to take our natural property and make it into municipal land that you have access to, which by giving you access to it, it spreads out farther and makes it larger, as he had pointed out. It takes away from our property and the natural look of our property. It gives access to snowmobiles, ATV, and we've tried to stop any paths that start making on our property. We will make it so they cannot come across our property because it is our property. And by doing the municipal ditch, that will give access. Because we are so close to the corner and the access, people are wanting to get out and into Far Road and all of those, they're trying to cut across our property, and we've spent many years trying to stop that. So we're not really happy with it, the way that it's going to switch, and I'm not sure why the township has permission or can go onto our property and do things without our permission and then say we're going to charge you for it. I think.
Okay, thank you. There's some things there I know that our engineer or our drain superintendent would like to speak to, just in regards to the legalities of access to the drains and that. I'll look to the engineer perhaps to speak to that, please.
So in the report, you'll see that allowances are provided. Now that's for damages and right-of-way. Now that's not right-of-way to the public. That's right-of-way to the drainage superintendent and whoever he's conducting maintenance to in the future. And those right-of-way widths are specialized, they're identified on the drawings. It's, I believe, 18 meters. But this isn't, it's not like we're making a road for the public to use. This is a corridor to do drain maintenance. So it's, you know, it's a route where we will clear the brush. They will level the material in that corridor, and then they will reseed it, and it will grow up as grass. It's not meant for a snowmobile trail or a public corridor. And hopefully that's not what it becomes. As for Regional Road 24 cleaning their culvert, now when you look at Regional Road 24, it appears that they have no choice and they can't clean it because they have no outlet. The outlet runs through the residential properties just on the east side, and that ditch has no municipal status. They can't essentially lower it. So the region can't really do anything. They can't go onto private lands and dig a drain. That's why we're doing this as part of this project. And that's why there's allowances provided for the damages in right-of-way. You know, that portion, yeah, it is currently water course, and it has a municipal drain on either end of it, and that is usually a unique situation. And we're trying to establish a new route with grades, so Mark has something to maintain the ditch to and provide an adequate outlet for upstream lands. And that's what it's doing. It's giving the upstream lands an adequate outlet, and we're designed it in a depth that we don't have flooding on the adjacent lands. So looking at the Visser property, currently the drain is anywhere from 2 to 2.5 feet deep. The new drain will be approximately 4 feet deep. So hopefully that contains the water, conveys it through the property, and doesn't flood the property out, as I believe that's what's happening currently.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
Regardless if you want them to use it, we're in Wainfleet and they are going to use it, as they're going to try to get access to our property. They already do, and we try to prohibit that, but this will be a pathway for them. Yeah, I guess, the amount of allowance that we're being given to give up that amount of our natural property is very minimal in comparison to the price of property these days. It goes across the whole length of our property. It's quite a ways. We do not use it for farmland, so we will not be putting the tile in. We will not be doing any of that. So the benefit to us is basically for us is nil. I believe if the culvert was by the region or by you, whoever is supposed to do it, would do what they should do for their culverts to make sure that they're draining through, then we wouldn't have the flooding that we do. If that person from the township would not have come and taken our natural waterway, which streamed along nicely, and dug it and then basically made a dam where the only place the water could go was on our property. Those two things together would eliminate our problems on our property and the problems upstream. To put something unnatural on our natural property, we're not happy with.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by any councillors? Councillor McClellan?
Just one question, and I'll give it to Mark, I guess. And so the concern of snowmobiles and dirt bikes and quads and what have you using this, could we not put a farm gate at the edge of their property and just, you can have a key, they can have a key, and the thing's locked and you just stop people from going in? Farm gates aren't all that expensive. I don't want to start something all across town, but if it satisfies this problem, does that get it done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 250 kilometers of municipal drains that cross pretty much every road. So I don't feel that would be a large number to pursue. Additionally, we're paying for the allowance to access private property. It still is private property, and landowners have the ability to sign it as such. I know that's a common thing in a lot of the areas I go, is there are gates, there are signs, there are postings by private landowners, because some people do allow that access. And I think it is more the private property aspect, not the township.
So then it would be okay when we're done for them to put farm gates up across it. Is that correct?
I'd like to the engineer to speak, please.
So, like, any owner could put a fence up. This doesn't restrict that. It doesn't restrict any sort of that. I know the township will have bylaws with construction of houses adjacent to drains, but they're welcome to fence their property. There's still a road ditch at Regional Road 24 to cross. It's not like I can drive down the access route with a pickup truck easily. Mark's right, there's many drains, and we do a lot of drains in a lot of other townships. The right-of-way it's just a natural feature of the property. It's not a corridor, and it's not going to be, 2 or 3 years from now, you'll never know. It will be just part of the property where the excavated material was leveled and reseeded.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I believe Wainfleet, we're lowland here. I think we have the second highest amount of drainage in all of Ontario. And so it's really important to maintain our drains. I live very, very close to a drain, and it was cleaned out last year, and it's already completely natural looking. It's still your land, it's private land. You can, as they said, you can fence it, contain it, prohibit people from going on it. That's totally as it is now. You have that control, it's your property. It's just important that, we have a water issue here in Wainfleet that we have to constantly manage, and this is just part of that management of it. And as I say, in a year or 2 years, it'll be kind of grown back in, looking natural again, and that's just kind of how that works. So, any other comments? Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to either Mark or the engineer. Realistically, what is the life expectancy of the drain before maintenance would need to be done again?
Mark might be better to answer this, but typically, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. Now, some municipalities have a maintenance program. I'm not sure exactly what Mark does, but some municipalities will go in every 5 years and simply just maintain the drain because it's proactive. Some municipalities are more reactive, where they wait for a complaint to come in by one of the landowners, and then they will act. And that's what this allows to do. So if somebody at the top end, they feel the drain isn't functioning, or it's blocked, or, there's a beaver dam on it, they call Mark. Mark can go fix it. But some municipalities do large-scale maintenance on a rotating basis.
Go ahead.
And one more thing. Mary Ann, do you happen to remember roughly when, I assume it was the township that came in and did this work, do you happen to remember, just I think for Mark's benefit, so he can, not that it matters, it's, pardon the pun, water over the dam, but you happen to remember when that occurred?
Like 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, the engineer happens to maybe know.
like, I was around when we were appointed on the report in 2012. The maintenance work was done just prior to that, or let's call it the work. But there was no grades to dig it to. I believe the township went in and tried to alleviate a problem at a low-cost solution without proper authorities.
I think, Mayor, what we're trying to achieve here is, despite the fact that obviously something was not done quite properly 10 some odd years ago, we're just trying to fix it and do the right thing. And some of these other issues would be dealt with by the Court of Revision. So I understand your comments and Mr. Downey, but there is a process beyond this where some group of us that is going to be appointed are going to deal further with some of these things. But that being said, we're really just trying to get things fixed and do the right thing at this point. So that's just my comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan.
Just one other thing, and it's a question for Mark, and it's just a general question. So it's my understanding that most of the land from basically Lakeshore Road flows north to the Welland River in town. Is that kind of a general?
Generally, through you, Mr. Mayor, generally speaking, yes.
Okay,
most of the water
so
flows
then
north.
naturally, the closer you get to the river, the deeper your ditches or municipal drains are going to have to get the water to flow there. Unfortunately, both of you people live towards the end of the drain where it's getting to the river. And that's why, to make the rest of it all work, you end up with the deepest part of the ditch in your neighborhood. And I'm down on Lambert Road. We have huge ditches down there as well, right? It's because that drain runs through there, excuse me, that drain runs through there, and we have deep ditches on the side of our roads and going through some of the properties, not all of them, but it just, we're on the wrong end of the town for that matter, but that's why they're so deep and they're running that way. That's the way Mother Nature put it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Marianne? Sorry, I know you're not hearing what you want to hear, but...
No, I'm being educated anyway. Okay, so what permission for the township to come in and do something like this on my property? Because there is no drainage ditch on my property. It is a natural waterway. It was pointed out it was, and it's been a natural waterway. So now somebody's coming onto my personal property and saying, we're going to do this and we're going to charge you for it. Do I have no say on my own property, what goes on my property? Further down the property, or where the farmland is on the other side of Far Road, it is closer to the Welland River than it is to go across my property and go across 27 to get to the Welland River. What deciding factor? Is it because there's already a natural waterway that we're going to destroy that I have no say in on my own personal property?
Okay, thank you. Mark, I look to you for that one, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the Drainage Act has given the authority to do that. So through Section 78 of the Drainage Act, Council appointed the firm engineer, Spreed Associates, to extend an existing municipal drain, the Bridgewater drain, to sufficient outlet, which is the Bridgewater outlet drain. So through the Drainage Act, gives the township the authority to do that work. Landowners were notified throughout the process, as mentioned for our initial on-site meeting. Property owners in the watershed were invited. We reached out to any property owner. I had phone numbers, email addresses, extended that to try and open the communication. Following that, we had a preliminary meeting as well, where all of the property owners within that watershed received the same mailing that they received for this meeting. And the Drainage Act gave us that ability to do this project.
Yeah, it's a provincial law that supersedes everything. I'm going to look to our CAO here to make comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll put on my clerk hat for a second. The Drainage Act is, again, as mentioned, one of the provincial laws that are currently in place, and it's actually one of the oldest laws around to deal with trying to address water and drainage issues, particularly in agricultural areas. And what it is it's a means by which collectively people can apply through a provincial statutory process to try and alleviate flooding and other water-related issues in their property to make the land productive and to keep it viable. So, I mean, in that regard, again, it's one of the oldest pieces of legislation around, and it's been there for the purpose of making land usable. Those were just my comments.
Excuse me. Marianne, anything further that you would like to comment on?
No, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for being very attentive and understanding. As you say, there's lots to learn on the Drainage Act and how it works, and it keeps everybody safe. And depending where you sit, you know, maybe it's more favorable or less favorable depending where you sit on the drain. But it's really important here in Wainfleet because we do have 250 kilometers of drain here, and Wainfleet being such a low land, we'd be in big trouble if all our drains weren't functioning the way they're supposed to be. So thank you. Is there, Mr. Downey, but is there, no, sir, just look to anybody else present who would like to speak to this, and we still have to go to online people yet. So if there's nobody else present, Mr. Downey, you've had your shot, I think. Do we have anybody, excuse me, online that would like to speak? Okay, there's nobody online. Okay, yeah, Mr. Downey, another quick minute here.
Your engineer here was saying that they wanted to dig the ditch out, I forget how many feet deeper, all the way along to accommodate Farmer Jones and Farmer Yugovich way upstream so they can tile drain their property. Then why don't they tell Farmer Jones and Farmer Yugovich to tile it out to the Welland River, and it takes the flooding away from our property and these gentlemen, people's property, and there's no need for making the Grand Canyon even deeper.
Okay, would the engineer like to answer that one, please?
So, just so everyone's aware, this is an existing municipal drain. Many parts of it are, at least. You know, there was a report done in 2015 which established a watershed. So once the watershed is established, if you take if you look at some of the properties, so if you look at the property between Esley Road and Traver Road, essentially half the properties are in the watershed of, let's call it the Bridgewater drain, and half of them are in the Little Forks drain. Little Forks drain is another municipal drain. Now that there's a watershed established, you can't drain land, which is attributed to this drain, to the Little Forks drain without buying into the Little Forks drain. And Mark, as the drainage superintendent, should be enforcing this because the Little Forks drain has its own watershed. And if I were to take water to it, it's going to have increased flooding. And this drain has a watershed. And it's established. So it's also like that's the height of land. So if I were to tile out of the watershed, I'm essentially going through a hill. Now, in this area, that hill is quite significant. This is fairly rolly land. And essentially it's an already established watershed. And it was established in 1961 and reestablished in 2015. So we're not changing that, and we're just moving forward, trying to connect the two pieces that aren't municipal.
Okay, thank you.
If you have a topographical map showing the lay of the land and how it is flowing everything down to my property and these folks' property, then produce that topographical map and show me what hills and knolls and everything else that you are digging through to get from the very beginning of this canyon up to my property.
Okay. Have you visited Mr. Downey and explained any processes to him here and, shown him what is required and how it all works, Mark?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I have spoken with him several times and provided this level of information. So the watershed on here shows that the water, that hashed line, the water is coming towards the drain. Survey was completed that shows topographically the water is coming towards the drain. If we go to the other side of Regional Road 27, the Little Forks Creek drain is higher than the Bridgewater drain. The water cannot go that way. The engineer surveyed this drain, designed this drain, and this is the proposed watershed that shows that is the direction the water is traveling.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Downey.
Are you saying that the ditches along these roads that the drain is crossing cannot handle the runoff from the fields and so forth to go out to the Regional Road 27?
So actually, we'll stop you there, Mr. Downey. And this isn't really the right venue for this now. What I would like you to do is Mark, to set up a meeting again with Mr. Downey and actually work through the process with him and answer his questions. And if you need to walk the site, et cetera, do what we need to do to try to address Mr. Downey's concerns. Would that be okay, Mr. Downey? That's better than this process.
Actually, I was talking to the Member of Parliament earlier today, and they suggested that I set up a meeting with you.
Okay. And I would defer that meeting to our superintendent, our drain superintendent, who actually is, I would sit in a meeting with you and with him, and then it would be him and you out walking the land, looking at it, and him explain. He's the expert, and he's the trained person on it. So we are having that meeting per se now. I'm hearing you. I understand your dilemma and your concerns. So really, I think to try to address that, what we need to do is you and our drainage superintendent get together and spend some time together, and so that we can try to explain. If you're not happy at the end of that, then you and I can have a sit down and we can discuss it from there. But I mean, I put all our weight in our drainage superintendent, who's had all the training and does this every day and knows the whole system. So Mark, I'll look for you to please set that meeting up with Mr. Downey and do that fairly soon.
Just one thing, like the engineer was saying, that they want to, the farmers all upstream want to tile drain their property. This is why they want to dig it out even several feet deeper. Then if they want to tile drain to that particular canyon, then put the cost of the burden of the expense to those that want to tile drain and go out into that thing.
Yeah, that's all laid out provincially in the schedule, in the funding schedule. So it's all laid out in provincial law. So
it's laid out for myself and these folks to put the bill for somebody else to drain their property and dig out another 2 or 3 feet out of the canyon to
Mr. Downey, again, I'll ask you to let's meet with our drainage superintendent, and we can work the details out. He can explain things to you there. So, Councillor McClellan, you had a question, please?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is for both Mark and the engineer. So one thing that might settle this, could you work out what the cost would be to pipe it right through his property and how much it's going to add to the bill? Because maybe he's willing to pay that so he doesn't have the Grand Canyon running through his property. I don't know if it happens, but I keep hearing I don't want a canyon, so maybe we pipe it right through.
Look to the engineer to speak to that, please.
So when you're talking piping, you're talking a ditch enclosure. And a ditch enclosure requires a couple things. A, you need a DFO approval. And Mr. Downey is at approximately station 1700. So when the DFO looks at an enclosure and you enclose a piece in the middle of a drain, they basically go to you and say you're enclosing the whole top end of the drain. And I can tell you right now, that enclosure will be denied. And I can also tell you the cost for his property will be quite high. I have the impression he's not happy with the costs the way they are now. And I can tell you he would not like the cost if we were to enclose it. Our firm does a lot of enclosures, mostly in Chatham-Kent. And, you know, $100,000 does not go very far. I will also say in 2015, Mr. Downey appealed the watershed, and it went through the quarter revision on the Bridgewater outlet drain. And he was provided some of the information he's asking for at that time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Vliet, you had a question?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This could be appealed through the Court of Revision. Am I wrong, Mark? Or engineer?
So tonight we're looking at design aspects of the drain. One of them is the watershed. One of them is depth and what we're proposing. The Court of Revision, we're going to talk about costs and how it's associated. So there's $250,000 divvied up essentially among all the properties. And at the Court of Revision, council will have the opportunity to hear the concerns from the ratepayers. And if council decides that what I've presented is maybe not appropriate, they can redistribute it. But for instance, if they were to lower Mr. Downey, somebody else will have to increase. In years past, you know, I've sat in this room and I've watched council change assessments. So one example is the Wolford Road drain. It was actually presented the same night that this drain was presented on the Bridgewater outlet drain. But he also, if he is not happy at the quarter revision, he can go further to a drainage tribunal, which will take more time, and, you know, essentially he can voice his problems there. But being an established drain from 2015 with an established watershed, it's very hard for me to say that that's wrong, especially when I was the one involved doing it.
Right. That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to clarify one more thing for the general public who may be watching. There's a big difference between a ditch and a drain, just to let you all know.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak to this? I don't think so, and there's nobody online. Okay, is there anyone additionally who wishes to speak to the report? Please come forward, state your name. Anybody else present? Okay, so in conclusion, a motion that report DSR 008-2020 regarding consideration of the Bridgewater Municipal Drain be received, and that a bylaw be given 2 readings to provisionally adopt the Bridgewater Drain Report dated March 5th, 2019, prepared by Sprite Associates Limited under Section 78, Chapter D, 17 of the Drainage Act, RSO 1990. And that staff be directed to advance the Bridgewater Drain Engineer's Report to the Court of Revision as per Section 46, Sub 1 of the Drainage Act, RSO 1990. And that councillors, and I need a couple councillors to volunteer for that job, to do the Bridgewater Drain Court of Revision. Councillor Van Vliet.
Sure, why not?
And Councillor McClellan.
Learn something.
And Councillor Cridlin. Oh, and an alternate. Councillor Gilmore.
Why didn't you just tell us we had to do this?
Be appointed as an alternate to be tentatively scheduled for December 15th, 2020. And we need 3 councillors and an alternate, and we have that. And that upon completion of the appeal process, the drainage superintendent be authorized to proceed with construction of the drainage work in accordance with the Drainage Act. And can I have a mover and a seconder for all that, please? Councillor McClellan moves it, seconded by Councillor Van Vliet. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, recorded vote. Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
And that motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we move on to Emergency Control Group Staff Report. Presentation November 15th, storm event. Chief Alcott, would you please give your presentation?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This report or this presentation is just to go through a brief overview of our preparations, response, and recovery to the storm that the township experienced on Sunday, November 15th. So just bear with me and I can share my screen. All right. So as you're all aware, on Sunday, Sunday, November 15th, there was a storm event that hit the North Shore of Lake Erie. We started preparations on November 14th with a call from Hydro One requesting that they use the township facilities as a staging area. Shortly after that, I had a call with the MPCA on their storm and flood impacts. And at 11 o'clock that morning, the MPCA had issued a flood watch. That afternoon, we continued to do our prep, and that evening we put out some social media posts about the storm information. We also had all of our apparatus and equipment prepared, and I was in contact with Public Works about the incoming storm. Fire dispatch also provided us notification that they would be up staffing for the uptick in calls. On Sunday morning, the MPCA issued a flood warning. At that point, I then notified the control group and all fire personnel to be prepared for the incoming storm. I also managed to contact Dembridge and invite them to also stage with Hydro should the need arise. And we also contacted Niagara Region Emergency Management and Social Services should there be the need for a reception center at the arena, should there be evacuees. And then that afternoon at 3 o'clock, our first emergency call was received for flooding. So that day, within 24 hours, we responded to 11 dispatch calls using all of our apparatus and over 30 firefighters. We ended up with 6 power line incidents. During that event, we also had 3 non-dispatch calls where we were responding to a caller on our way back and came across another one. Public Works also had 6 staff called in. There was 3 road blockages and 6 road closures. As you can see here, this is a snapshot of fire dispatch CAD in a 24-hour period, highlighting the call times and call type. I have redacted addresses for privacy. So just as a point of reference, the emergency assistance calls all relate to flooding, and the arcing hydro lines are as reported. This is a snapshot of the NOAA buoy, the Port Colborne weather station that's out in Lake Erie. And you can see between the hours of 5 p.m. and 12 a.m., that is when wind gusts and wave heights were at its highest, with a recorded wind gust of 50.5 knots and the highest waves at 15.4 feet. In review of in comparison of this storm to the Halloween storm of 2019, the storm of 2019 did see higher wind gusts and higher waves. But it was very, very similar. Looking at our flooding, so just some of the roads works that was completed. Like I said, there was 3 or 6 roads closed, all occurring in and around 5 o'clock in the evening and moving on through. And by 7 in the morning the next day, the roads department had all of the roads open for the morning commute. Very similar to the Halloween storm, you can see here some of the shoreline erosion and impacts to buildings that were. So here we're looking to the far left of the picture is the Dunnville town line. You can kind of see the Long Beach conservation area there, and then we also had some erosion to the east of that. Again, Side Road 18 and Lakeshore. That whole area was also flooded, which was the reason why we had to close Lakeshore Road. The Bellevue Beach area, again, floodwaters were actually higher this year than the Halloween storm of 19, but very similar in elevations. And then new for this year, we actually had increased flooding activity in the Churchill, Fletcher, Colliers area, which was new this year. I think that's largely due to the wind and wave direction that the point provided some protection last year. But again, Lakeshore between Golf Course and Rathfarm was also closed due to flooding. Some of the damages that can be seen from this year's storm, with the surge coming up and the waves, we did have some, the first picture to your left there, some structural damage to a building where the front wall was knocked in. The next two are erosion. I think you can see the land has actually lowered about 3 feet and underpinned or undermined the foundation. It has actually washed out the deck and part of the foundation there. This first picture on the left is actually the property at the Wainfleet Dunville town line where the break wall was damaged in the Halloween storm and has since completely eroded away. We were also called to this is a fuel tank at a commercial property in Haldimand that was actually washed down the lake and then up onto shore about 30 feet. Luckily, this fuel tank was empty. It was recovered by Public Works and returned to the owner with the Ministry of Environment notified. So these are just some of the damages and some of the responses. Very similar to last year. We are still working with the Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and any damages that are reported, we share with the ministry. But very similar to last year, the municipality doesn't have any authority or any powers in the decision making. We're just information gathering. So that's it for my presentation. I would be happy to take any questions if needed.
Okay, thank you. Motion that the presentation respecting November 15th, 2020 storm event be received for information. I have a mover, seconder for that, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Cridlin. I'm sure I saw your hand go up there. And discussion, please. Okay. Oh, Councillor Van Vliet.
Okay. Chief, thanks for the report and thank you for your work out there. I know how bad it was. I had discussions with actually people yesterday along the lakeshore, and they'd like to form a committee about shoreline protection. They like a couple members of council, if not one, a member from the MPCA. They understand that as a municipality, there's not a lot we can do because we don't have the funding, but they want to start a grassroots movement to do something. Start here and work our way up. So they reached out to me to talk to see how we could develop something. So I don't know how I go about forming a committee, but I'd like to do that. These people haven't even repaired from last was it a year? It's not becoming 50-year storms. It's becoming every year, and like I said, they understand completely that we financially can't do a lot, but with support, we can start something. Like we need to start something.
I look to the CAO to make a comment on that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it actually sounds like a very intriguing and interesting idea that could have some real potential benefits for, again, everyone who becomes involved. Again, it wouldn't necessarily be a township committee or a township-led committee, but certainly we can assist in from a resource perspective in helping them coordinate and helping them sort of get some idea and direction. So again, my suggestion is if that is something that council would like to pursue, again, I'll put my clerk hat on for a moment and suggest that if we were to get sort of an expression of interest in writing from the members of the public addressed to council, we can put it before you as early as the next meeting. As correspondence, a motion could then be passed, sort of directing the sort of assistance in getting that up and running. And if there is actual membership ideas about representation, for example, from council or otherwise, if that could be included in the correspondence, we could perhaps move forward with even going so far as to make an appointment from council at that point, and then we could set up a meeting and provide some meeting space. Clearly, with COVID, we have certain restrictions in place, but I think we can find some space for a meeting or arrange a Zoom meeting or whatever is necessary in this day and age, and see if we can get those discussions rolling, because I think discussion is the best way to get things happening, at least to start.
Okay, thank you.
That would be very beneficial. Yeah, we need to get something going. I think I'd prefer it to be a committee of council or council of committee, however the wordage is, because they did ask for representation from council to be there. So I'll relay that message. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the chief's report? Okay, seeing none, recorded vote to receive or reject. Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
And that is carried. We move on to correspondence now. The next first one we have is C-259 2020, request from Crime Stoppers of Niagara for a proclamation and flag raising in January 2021 to promote Crime Stoppers Month. I think we did this last year as well. Any discussion on that letter? Anyone want to make a motion that we, Councillor Gilmore is making the motion that we raise the flag again for 2021, and as always it'll be the ceremony out front, and then it'll end up on our pole inside the council there in the front lobby. Have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor.
I moved it already.
Moved by Councillor Gilmore, right? Seconded by. Oh, sorry, I'm looking over there. Thank you. Okay. And so any other discussion on that? And recorded vote. Oh, Councillor Cridland, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Maybe I think that it's for the month of January. I don't think we've heard from Crime Stoppers as a council. I could be wrong on that. But if we haven't, maybe we invite them or extend an invitation for them to maybe do a small presentation to us during the month of January. It does seem like they are expanding what services they offer the community, and that also might be helpful if it can fit in the January timeframe with our regular business.
Okay, that's a great idea, Councillor Cridland, and we'll direct staff to extend that invitation to Crime Stoppers Niagara to come and make a presentation in January. So, thank you very much. Okay, where was I doing the vote? Yes. Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
And Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
And that is carried. Next piece of correspondence is the Niagara Conservation Authority C-280 2020. Request from Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority respecting a resolution of support regarding changes to Conservation Authorities Act and Conservation Authorities' role in land use planning. There's a motion of support that has been prepared by the NPCA on page 149, 150 of tonight's agenda package. And any discussion on that, please? Councillor Cridland, sorry.
Through you, Mayor. Just maybe to add to what we have in our package, and you can obviously speak to this better than myself, but I believe the Niagara region has already then endorsed or provide their endorsement to a similar type of request. So again, the request is it's limited in that it's really just asking for the province to pause on this piece of legislation. And hopefully the other councillors have had a chance to look at what the contents are. One of them does point to just leaving the choice of either appointing a councillor or a citizen available still to the municipality. So that's probably the one that is significant to our community, but the rest, of course, are very significant to the environment. So if you've had a chance to read it over, I may be able to answer a question, but otherwise I'll just wait for council's decision on whether or not they wish to endorse this, this advocacy letter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cridland. Any questions on that? Councillor McClellan?
I cannot endorse this. I listened to Mark earlier tonight. 18 months to get an okay to put a municipal drain in. That's ridiculous. This Sherry talks, we all talk about the people on the lakeshore. To fix your wall, you have to go to the MPCA, and they take months to give you a permit while your foundation is hanging out in the air. These people have no compassion, have no sense of urgency. They shouldn't be doing what they're doing. They're there to control floods and make sure nobody dies. They're not there to tie up municipal drains. They're not there to tie up people fixing their properties. They're way out of what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have comment? Councillor Gilmore?
Well, I concur partly with Councillor McClellan. There's parts of this bill that I realize that some of you are going to be surprised that I don't like it, but there are a few things that I think that we should continue to push for. I don't see the problem myself with having citizen appointments. Should a municipality decide that they don't have an appropriate elected official with the expertise to serve on this board, we're quite fortunate that we have quite a good person to serve on this board at this point in time, but that may not be the case going forward. So, but I do concur with Councilor McClellan that the MPCA has got to start to stay in their lane a little bit more. So I don't know where we go from here. There's some things that I'd like to see, to stay the way we have it, and there's other things that are a problem. So I don't know what we should do.
Okay, so I looked at this, and obviously this came before the region, and it was supported by the region staff, and I in fact voted in favor of it. What I see here is I agree with Councillor McClellan as well, and also I agree with Councillor Gilmore. There's parts of this that are good, and there's parts of it that are stopping us from getting our work done. I'm equally concerned about the amount of time and the weight that the NPCA has in regards to getting some of our things done that we want to get done here in the township. It's a struggle. But when I read through that, it was an overreach in my concern by the province opening the doors completely. And so what I would like to see is simply that this, in my mind, this would be defeated and go back, and they would have to tighten it up a little bit. Interesting enough, all the municipalities of Halton and Peel and all the other municipalities have all gone against that because it's too broad. It's just the doors flung wide open. And so in that sense, I support this, because if everybody speaks up and goes back, the government will look at it and say, okay, we just threw the doors open, so maybe we better tighten it up here and there and not be quite so open about it. But I totally agree with what you're saying, Councillor McClellan. It is an issue with us, constantly struggling to get approvals done. But on the flip side, to open it up completely isn't right either. So there's somewhere in the middle here where the common ground that we have to find. So I'll be voting in favor of supporting this motion this evening myself, because it's not a matter of saying that it's not right or wrong. It needs to be reworked. It needs to go back, and the province needs to hear that you just can't throw the doors wide open on green space and everything else and let everything go crazy. So that's my 2 cents worth on it, and that's where I sit. So, any other comments, Councillor Cridland?
No, I think it's really important that, our residents hear this being discussed, because it is a problem when it prevents, landowners doing what is right for their land. And so this is about slowing down and taking a look. It isn't saying to stop doing things or start doing things. It's really asking for this pause. And if we look at the legislation, it is opening it up, like you say. It's how council will vote on endorsing this pause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Van Vliet, anything? Councillor Gilmore once more.
Yeah, the only thing that possibly we should do is, the region funds the MPCA per se in the Niagara region, which affects us. What goes on in other CAs, that's up to their region. But our problem, as Councillor McClellan has pointed out, is that our CA is not always acting in the best interest of what we need to get done. But so why don't we just concentrate on what we need done here and not worry about what's going on in some other part of the province, but tell start talking to our conservation authority about the inefficiencies. I don't have a problem with sending this back to say to the province it needs to have another look, but I don't want another look to mean, well, we're going to have another look in 2 or 3 years and continue on with the kind of stuff that has been going on for years, decades in the Niagara region. So I'll support it because I think there's some stuff in here that I don't like in Bill 229, but on the same hand, we need to start being a little more proactive with what's going on in our own house.
Yeah, I agree completely. I've had conversations, and I know our CAO has as well. I've had conversations with the NPCA in regards to the challenges we have in getting things done here, and the amount of time. I wouldn't want to say that the responses were, oh yeah, we'll fix that right away, but they understand. So I know in one vein, this motion to approve it would be to have us have to carry on with status quo, and status quo is not acceptable to us. It's just it hurts us so much. So, but I just don't think it's worse to just throw it wide open and without any thought at all about our environment. So it needs to go back to the government. And enough municipalities look at it and say, it's too much, then hopefully the provincial government comes back with a fix in the middle. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could we put some suggestions to this? When there's an emergency, there's a 2-week timeline to get a permit out. The guy's house was there for the last 100 years. His break wall breaks down, gets destroyed, and part of his yard goes. You can't take 6 months and leave the man hanging.
Same with our municipal drains. That drain has been there since 1961.
Clean it. Where's the common sense? This is what has to go back to the government because they do this on everything. And I probably deal with it more than anybody else on council, that's for sure. And it's gotten ridiculous. Their nose is in every single thing that goes in. And believe me, they do a lot of good work. I'm not saying that, but they just don't have any sense of urgency. Like on a municipal drain, that should be done within 20 working days. There's no big deal. It's been there forever. Why does it take 18 months to tell us that we can clean a ditch? This is where they're gone. They're off. They're way out of their league. You know, they're into.
And don't forget.
But really, they are. They're
Yeah,
into campgrounds. They're into everything else.
Yeah.
They're a conservation authority to make sure they were set up to make sure people don't drown in floods. Not set up
Yeah, they have evolved.
wedding venues and everything else that they're into.
So, okay, so let's get back here to the motion to support this or not support it. It's on the floor. We have a mover and a seconder. Discussion is finished. And we'll take a vote on that, please, and that'll be a recorded vote. So, wasn't it all? Get ahead of myself. Okay, mover and a seconder to put that motion on the floor. Councillor Gilmore and Councillor Van Vliet, thank you. Any discussion more? That's done. Councillor Van Vliet, Councillor Cridlin, everybody's happy? Okay, we'll take the vote on adopting that motion. And that's a recorded vote. Councillor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor McClellan.
Opposed.
And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, we have two bylaws to be read and passed this evening and one to be provisionally adopted. That the following bylaws be read and passed this 24th day of November 2020. Bylaw 45-2020 being a bylaw to provide for interim tax levies for 2021. And number B, 46-2020 being a bylaw to authorize borrowing to meet current expenditures during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2021. A mover and a seconder to put those on, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Cridlin. I'm sure I saw your hand go up there, yes. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, recorded vote. Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
And Councillor Gilmore.
Favor.
And that is carried. And second, that the following bylaw be read for a first and second time and provisionally adopted this 24th day of November 2020. And bylaw number 47-2020 being a bylaw to provide for drainage works in the Township of Wainfleet. That's the Bridgewater Drain. A mover and a seconder to put that on the floor. Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Van Vliet. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, recorded vote. Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
And that is carried. Okay, and that bylaw for the Bridgewater Drain will return for a third reading and final adoption after the quarter revision is finished. Okay, notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Okay, seeing none. I need a mover and a seconder to move into closed session, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Van Vliet. And those two items are Section 239-2C Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality. One item, potential acquisition, disposition of land. And B, Section 239-2B of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. 3 items, personnel, staffing matters. Mover and a seconder, it's already on the floor. Any further discussion for that? Okay, recorded vote. Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
That's carried. We'll now move into closed session.